Should I get a micro? Oh. Okay. Hold on. Trying to. Oh, shoot. They just. Oh my god. No. Mm. Okay. Okay. Mm, I hope I can hear you now.
Hey, Nathan, you're muted.
Okay. I can hear you guys. I can hear you now. No.
Can you hear me?
Yes, finally. Oh my goodness. Okay.
So thank you for joining us.
Mhm.
And I think you and I have actually done a consult before. So we've talked about some of these concepts already a little bit.
Yeah.
So today, essentially, what we're going to do is we'll talk about some of the underlying principles that we use in Akashic Trancework. We're going to explore the different trance states and how we can take ourselves between them. And then we're going to talk a little bit about what we call astral boundaries, which are ways that we protect ourselves when we work in these trance states. And then at the end, we'll do a brief guided session, which will illustrate some of these principles in a way that will be fun and relaxing and hopefully make sense. So again, thanks for being here. So I want to talk a little bit about how Akashic Trancework helps. So essentially in Akashic Trancework, we've come to understand that our consciousness grows in a predictable cycle. And this has come about through a lot of research and channeling and soul seeking. And this is what we've come to understand is that this pattern can be not only observed, it can be worked with in order to allow ourselves to really grow, to really evolve, to become more, to heal, and to let go of those things that no longer serve us. We call this the ARE cycle, and this comes from the idea of Ubuntu, which is a word that means I am because we are. It's an expression of the unity principle, the way that we're all one. I exist because you can perceive me, and vice versa. We perceive separation, which is what gives us identity, so on and so forth. So this idea, I am because we are, it's so powerful. And this idea of ARE came about through our exploration of that concept. So we've come to this idea: activate, release, and expand. When we activate our awareness, when we become aware of something, we have a choice of what to do with it. Maybe it's something we don't need to do anything with, but oftentimes when we have an activation, it's because of a difficult, traumatic event. Or it might just be a change in our life. Maybe it's a job or a relationship or a move or anything. Anything could be an activation, and suddenly our universe has changed. Our lives are changed. Everything's different, right?
Mm-hmm.
So as we go through these activations in life, when we find these things we need to let go of, what we can do is we can choose: do we want to release those things, or do we want to suppress those things, right? Most of the time in life we suppress. That's our default behavior in most circumstances, because we don't have a lot of spaces in life to release. Release takes a little bit of work. It takes some soul searching. It takes some time to face ourselves, to look at our core beliefs, to look at our core conditioning. But once we do that work, once we let go of those things, we make space inside of ourselves. We make space to expand. And expansion can be anything. A lot of times when we talk about expansion, we're talking about expanding our awareness and connecting with our past lives, connecting with our ancestors, connecting with our star family. But really, it can be anything. It doesn't have to be that. It can just be something that makes you happy. It's about thriving. We want to move beyond survival mechanisms into thriving mechanisms. And that's what the ARE cycle is about. It's just an observed pattern that we fall into. But when we become aware of it, we become empowered to work with it. Because we like to say sometimes, if we don't ARE, if we don't R, then we will activate, then suppress and suffer. And that means that we're an ass. We don't want to be an ass. We want to R. We are. Right. So it's kind of our little clever joke there. So this is how we're going to use our time together again. We're going to talk about some tools for working in these different trance states. We'll go through some techniques for cultivating astral boundaries for safe trance work. We'll go through this guided journey, and then at the end, if you want to, we can discuss your experiences a little bit. We can give you some feedback. There's also a worksheet provided with this webinar that you'll receive afterwards if you don't already have it, and that will kind of give you a way to gauge and assess your own trance work abilities. So talk a little bit about trance states. So what is a trance state? Well, trance means a lot of different things, but ultimately when we talk about trance states, we're talking about these altered states of mind. We think differently between these different states. So why do we care about that? Because every different state of trance has a specific purpose, a specific ability that it unlocks within us. And all of these trance states are there to give us the power to engage the subconscious mind, the spirit realm, the dream world, for healing, for empowerment, for understanding, for growth, for learning. Most likely, if you're drawn to this work, you've been in trance states many times, but the idea is, how do we get there and how do we get out of it? How do we intentionally and deliberately bring ourselves into these different states? Because these are more than just different states of mind. These are actually other senses that we have. The Egyptians taught us that we have 360 senses. We only think about 5 or 6 of those senses, right? At most, we have this general idea of our intuition or our psychic awareness, but really it's more fine-tuned than that. And when we can fine-tune our senses, when we can attune in to those specific senses, it's kind of like realizing you've been walking around your entire life with your eyes closed and your hands over your ears. We want to be able to engage those senses to activate and sometimes deactivate them if we need to. It's the same way we can open and close our eyes. We want to have that level of power, that level of discernment. So in order to understand these different states we can get to that are so useful for this process, we should understand first these different brainwave patterns. And these are common knowledge for people that have been engaged in any sort of self-work or brain entrainment. If you do binaurals, if you do anything like that, you're probably somewhat familiar with these things. But this is really what helps us to understand these different states of trance and how we can get to them through understanding how brain waves work. Our brain has frequencies, has tones essentially running through it, right? They can be measured on an EEG device. And depending on what frequency, what wavelength of energy is moving through our brains, that's going to determine what sense we have active, what level of awareness that we're at. When we have beta waves active in our minds, we're very awake, we're alert, we're energized. Whenever we experience a lot of excitement or a lot of fear, any intense external emotions really bring about the beta waves. For a lot of people, they have too much beta activity. They're too active. They're too engaged with their external world, and going within is difficult. But for some people, maybe they don't have enough beta activity. Maybe they don't have enough ability to keep track of their lives. Maybe they lose track of appointments, or they can't be on time for things, and they can't, hold a job and can't do basic tasks for themselves. And those are people that need to stimulate more beta activity in their brains. But in Akashic Trancework, we don't talk a whole lot about activating beta waves. We want to bring ourselves into deeper states. Primarily the alpha and theta states are where we do our work. And if we need to bring in some more beta activity, we can. There's some easy ways to do that. But again, we're primarily focusing on the alpha and theta states. So your alpha states are physically, mentally relaxed, very kind of daydreamy, maybe spacing out a little bit, light meditation is an alpha state. If you've ever done anything like ayahuasca or LSD or psilocybin, those bring about those alpha states as well. They're very engaged and they're very useful for a lot of different things we'll talk about here in a moment. We also have delta states, which are that deep, completely asleep place where your body is just relaxed, your mind is completely let go and surrendered all ego concerns. And it's a very deep state of peace and relaxation. And it can be very healing and very helpful. There's not a lot of suggestion, not a lot of communication that happens in delta states. So we try to really work in the alpha and theta places. Now, the theta place is kind of considered sometimes the sort of sweet spot of trance work, because that's where the really deep, engaged visual sensations happen. It's where we're pretty much disconnected from our bodies and we're fully engaged with our inner worlds. When you're dreaming, you're in a theta state. When you're very deeply relaxed and your mind's completely engaged and you're not paying attention to your body, you're in a theta state. We can do a lot of work if we can induce theta states and engage the mind creatively. And so much that we can do in a shamanic experience or in a deep hypnotic state. You're in that theta place, and that's where you can really, again, engage with your inner world. We also talk about gamma states sometimes, and gamma states are not things we can really induce per se, but we can get there through cultivation of our awareness. We like to equate gamma states with heart-centered awareness. We talk about being fully present. We talk about being fully aware, relaxed, calm, focused, but also relaxed. It's a very powerful state of being, and it's unlikely that we'll be there all the time. But if we can cultivate that place, it's an amazingly healing, empowering place to be. But again, we primarily focus on the alpha and theta induction and Akashic Trancework because it's where most people tend to be most of the time. So again, we talked a little bit about alpha trance. So in alpha trance, when we go into that kind of relaxed, daydreamy place, what that does for us is it gives us astral access. And when we talk about our astral space or our astral states, we're not necessarily talking about projecting our bodies elsewhere or having an out-of-body experience, although that is a valid experience that many people have. We're just talking about tapping in with everything that's non-physical, everything
Mhm.
inside of us, all of our thoughts, our feelings, our imagination, our creative abilities, all those things are astral experiences because they're not physically predictable. You can't predict how emotions and things like that will go through basic physical laws. If I have a physical ball and I drop it, it's going to fall every time. But if I have an imaginary ball, then it can just float off or turn into a
Mhm.
bird or anything like that because it's governed by a different set of laws that aren't so predictable. So in Akashic Trance work, we want to engage that astral space, and going into an alpha trance is very useful for that. We spend a lot of times, many of us, in these places, kind of daydreaming, fantasizing, spacing out, and it's very normal. And our society tends to look down on people that spend a lot of time
Mm.
engaging their alpha states, right? Because it's like, well, are you paying attention? Are you just daydreaming? Are you just kind of spacing out? And in Akashic Trance, we're come to understand that these states are actually very powerful. You can do a lot of creative visualization in those states and really engage with that inner self because, the mind works through symbolism. The mind speaks in symbolism. The subconscious mind
Mhm.
communicates in what we call the dream language because that's how we communicate. So when we create these intentional, imaginative, creative constructs in our minds, we are engaging with the subconscious. We are engaging with our deeper, inner, higher selves.
Mhm.
And the more that we can do that, the more of this empowerment we can achieve. So, beyond just daydreaming, there's a lot of power in creating these intentional sort of astral constructs, which is a lot of what we do in our
Mhm.
practice. We develop tools that we can cultivate and use in our minds. So, alpha trance is very powerful for that, but it's not for everything.
Mhm.
However, if we want to get ourselves down into those places, we can do so very easily. We developed a couple very simple techniques that can bring pretty much anyone down into an alpha state very quickly from any state of mind. So if you're in a very kind of active, engaged state, you can use these techniques to relax yourself. It's really all about relaxation. We need to relax our bodies a little bit in order to allow our minds to kind of wander off and do the things they need to do. But first, the body has to relax. So, the first method that we use to get ourselves down into trance is simple breath work.
Mhm.
And you're probably familiar with this. You've done any kind of meditation or yoga or pranayama, qigong, all these things incorporate the breath very much and sometimes in very specific ways. We've discovered that to get ourselves into a basic alpha state, there's a very simple breathing pattern that we can use. And most of us can do this very easily if we can just allow ourselves to relax into the process of breathing. Typically, it's about 5 seconds on the inhale and
Mhm.
5 seconds on the exhale.
Mhm.
Some people find they like to hold their breath between the inhalation and the exhalation for five
Mhm.
seconds, and that allows for some centering time to kind of bring the energy up. And if you do that, I recommend putting your tongue on the roof of your mouth, and
Mhm.
that makes the breath
Right.
holding more comfortable. But that's optional. Really depends on what you feel. And any of these exercises, I recommend making them your own. Just kind of observe how the different breath patterns and the toning that we'll cover here in a second, observe how those things change your awareness, how they shift your consciousness when you do them. So, again, about 5 seconds. It may be a bit longer or a bit shorter depending on your lung capacity. So, I invite you now, if you'd like, to try a couple basic alpha breaths with me
Mhm.
and just relax a little bit. So, I'm going to count for you. I'm going to count in for 5 and then out for 5.
Mhm.
So counting in, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and out. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, in. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, out. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, in. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Out. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. You'll immediately see how that kind of helps you relax a little bit. You might start to kind of float off, and that's what we want. We want to just sort of engage with our inner selves, with our thoughts and our feelings, just observe those things. So breath work is great and it's highly effective, but it's not always the answer, because sometimes we don't want to count our breath. Sometimes it's not comfortable. Sometimes our minds are too distracted with other things. So there's another practice that we use that you may or may not be familiar with. It's not an especially common practice, but it's very powerful. And it's a simple practice of toning, using the sound of our
Okay.
voice to vibrate. You've probably done this many times,
Yes.
whether you've done it formally or informally. Yeah. So
Mhm.
yeah, it feels really nice and it's a nice way to relax. If you've done mantra practice or chanting or that kind of stuff, it's very similar, but toning doesn't have to be anything specific. It doesn't have to be a specific tone or sound or syllable or note. The key to it, from what we've come to understand, is toning into specific areas of the body. Different parts of the body tune us in to different states of awareness. And it's a very relaxing, easy, quick way to get ourselves to these different trance states very easily in a very relaxing way. So, in order to induce, to bring ourselves into that alpha state, what we want to do is tone into the head, more of the face, the neck, the throat area, the third eye. We're activating the third eye when we do that. We're activating the visual cortex. We're activating our nasal cavity. We're activating all those parts of us that are about communication and breathing and reception, our throats and our tongues and our jaws. So I invite you now, if you want to try it with me. You can do this anytime. You may want to do it with people that you know. It's great with children, and everyone loves it, even if they don't understand what it's for. So take a nice deep breath. And we're just going to hum basically into the face. It doesn't have to sound like anything. We're not performing. It's just about feeling the vibration, feeling the vibration in your face. Let's try it one more time. So it takes some time to get comfortable with it, but yeah, it activates very quickly. It's a very quick activation. You can feel it very physically. It's a great relaxation technique apart from just going into a trance state. I found that just toning into these different parts of my energy body will be very effective, and anybody can do it. So let's talk a little bit about our theta states. So as we mentioned, these theta states are when you're dreaming. They normally happen when you're dreaming. But in Akashic trance work, we want to induce theta states from an awake state. We want to go down from beta to alpha to theta without having to go into that delta state. Typically, when you're sleeping, you'll go down into a delta state and your body will relax and your mind will relax. And then eventually, if you get enough sleep, you'll move up into that theta place. But we don't want to fall asleep in trance work unless we need to. Sometimes we do need to. But usually, if we fall asleep, we may not recall what happens. We want to actually go in to our astral space, into our Akashic space, and bring something back, right? And that's kind of the problem with dream work. A lot of us don't remember our dreams, so we don't necessarily get the full benefit of that subconscious interface, of that subconscious communication that our minds are trying to give us, right? So in trance work, if we can induce theta states in ourselves or in others, if we choose to work with others and guide them, it's very powerful, and we can do a lot of very deep work. We can work through traumas. We can explore past lives. We can connect with our ancestors. We can go to spirit realms. We can connect with light beings. This is where the real traditional astral experience happens, is in this theta state. I believe that when we are in our dreams, when we're lucid dreaming, we actually are astrally traveling, we're astrally
Mm-hmm.
projecting. And we can actually access that same awareness from a conscious state by just minding our breath or our tones. It's actually very simple. The challenge with theta states can be the body, once we get that relaxed, will tend to want to go to sleep. So having a guide or an asker or something in place to help you stay in that theta place long enough to bring something back out of it is kind of the art and science of managing theta states. So how do we get into these theta states? Again, breath and toning. So the typical theta breath is going to be about 9 seconds, depending on your lung capacity. It might be more, it might be 10. You don't want to go much beyond that. The deeper breath you take, the more relaxed you'll get, which, if you need to rest and sleep, that's great. But if you go more than 10 seconds, you'll most likely put yourself to sleep. You're actually depriving your brain of oxygen at that point a little bit, and that will make you sleepy, So do what's natural. It's not the longest breath. It's like the second longest breath you can take, basically, right? So again, for most of us, it's about 9 seconds, and 7 seconds is plenty for most people. But, again, play with it. See how the different breathing patterns change your consciousness. So I invite you to, if you wish, try to do some breathing with me. And we're just going to do 7 seconds, just real briefly, so we don't, kind of topple over. We will actually go through and induce a trance state here in a few minutes. But first, let's just go ahead and relax. And I'm going to count in for 7 and then out for 7. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Out. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. In. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Out. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. So you can see, even with just that brief pattern of breathing, your body starts to relax quite a bit, and you start to kind of droop a little bit. Usually when we are going into a theta state, we just relax our bodies as much as possible. We lay back and have good back and neck support. I'm going to recommend that for here in a minute when we go into that trance experience. But it's very relaxing. It feels really nice. And again, breath isn't always where we want to go. Sometimes we want to use toning because toning feels very relaxing. It's very pleasant. It's very primal. It's the same type of thing that mothers do with children, right? That's how mothers relax children. So most of us have a primal connection to the simple vibration of toning. And theta toning is probably my favorite thing to do in the world because it's so immediately relaxing, immediately grounding to our energy. And all we have to do again is kind of hum down into our bodies, in this case, down to that space between the heart and the solar plexus. And that's the place where we go to tone ourselves into theta. So if you want to give it a try, just real briefly, take a deep breath in. I'm just humming down into that heart space right below. And if you do it right, you can feel the vibration in your chest and your hands and your arms. It's very relaxing. That's my favorite method of privately inducing a trance state because I can get there very quickly. I can relax myself from any state of mind. And it's very relaxing. It's just so calming to me. And you can experiment with different toning. Strangely enough, if you tone too deep, if you go too deep into your body, you'll actually begin to activate beta waves and energize yourself. If you tone down into your root, into your sacral space, you can activate your energy centers. So it's kind of interesting how that continuum works. So toning, it's lots of fun. It's really enjoyable. So what do we do once we're in those trance states, right? We can experiment with breathing, we can experiment with toning, we can take ourselves down into these trance states. And of course, what do we find when we go into trance states? All kinds of stuff, right? Tons of stuff. Our thoughts, our feelings, our memories, our physical sensations, our ideas, our daydreams, our fantasies, our worries, all these things just kind of start coming up. So what do we do when we get to these places, right? And that's really the fundamental work that we do in the Akashic trance work. Going into a trance state is not hard for most people, but why and what do we do there, right? That's ultimately what we care about. So in Akashic trance work, we talk about creating astral boundaries to protect our energy. The fundamental astral boundary is an intentional astral space. We can imagine things very easily, most of us can. And we want to have a place, an imaginary place within ourselves that we can go to. And when we talk about imaginary spaces, we're talking about something that's very real to us. When we imagine something, when we create something in our minds, it's real. Everything around you was imagined by somebody at some point. The imagination is a very powerful tool for engaging the subconscious mind. It allows us to directly interface with the subconscious in ways we can't normally do just through talking, right? Affirmation is great. We love affirmation. You know, we can scream at ourselves over and over again. You know, I am love, I'm abundance, I'm wealth, all these things. Eventually, the mind kind of gets bored of affirmation. And that's why it doesn't always work, because we need continual newness. The mind needs new information to process. So creating these intentional astral spaces, visually, creatively, engaging our senses, engaging that imagination, allows us to direct our energy. It allows us to conserve our energy, and it allows us to cultivate our energy. One of the biggest reasons that we have astral spaces is because we want to have a nice place within ourselves.
Wow.
The beach is probably one of the most common astral spaces that we have. People love the beach, right? The associations around the beach. Just going there is very easy for people to engage. They can feel the water, they can feel the sand, the textures are very relaxing. Most people have very positive associations with the beach. It's very common, but it could be anything. A lot of people might see a cabin in the woods, might be floating in the water. It can be a totally abstract place. It doesn't have to be realistic, but the point of it is we want to bring in the things that make us feel good, the things that make us feel happy. We want to bring in the things that make us feel joy, peace, and relaxation. We want to bring in all those things. Now, some people don't have a lot of those things, and that can be challenging, but most of us have at least a few things we can sum up, a few joyful experiences and memories that we can bring up, and that really gives us a place to start. It gives us a place to go immediately when we go into those trance places, or if we're feeling any distress at all. It's a very powerful relaxation tool because of the associations, what people associate with their safe space, with the beach. That's what brings us into that relaxed place, because we have memory. We have cellular memory of our associations around that safe space, around the beach. And that helps us to relax and to make space for ourselves. So let's talk a little bit more about what we do in that safe space. So we want to bring in the things that give us joy, right? We want to cultivate joy, because it's so important to allow ourselves to experience that. I think a lot of times as adults, we don't give ourselves space for joy or for play or for fun. You know, things get very serious. And this is a place where we can just really be ourselves, where we can just really talk to ourselves, connect with ourselves. And this is important because we don't often have pure space to ourselves on the inside. We don't have astral boundaries with the things that we need to keep outside of that space. There are certain things that don't belong in this space. Negative feelings, destructive feelings, sad feelings, those things have their place and we can't suppress them. They need to be listened to, but we don't need to focus on them all the time. Many people struggle with what's called the process of intrusive thoughts. Intrusive thoughts are very common, and they could be memories, they could be people that you know, they could be responsibilities, they could be your job, it could be, you know, something from the past that you can't let go of, some energy, some experience, some accumulation of experience, whatever it might be. It comes into your mind, into your heart on its own. maybe over and over again. The thing about boundaries is, in our physical experience, we can create boundaries. We might build a house. We might have a room we go into, and we can tell people to go out of that space if we need our own space. If we don't feel comfortable with somebody, we can tell them to step away. If we don't want to talk to somebody, we can do that. But if we're thinking about them still, if you're still thinking about someone or something, that energy, that being, that memory, whatever it is there within your personal heart space, within your personal astral boundary. So when those things come up, obviously they do require some of our energy. They want some of our energy. They're communicating with us. We need to be paid attention to. We need to be listened to. But we don't have to give all of our time and energy to those things. We don't have to give all of our life to those things, because all we really have is time, right? We only have time. Everything else is kind of an expression of time. Even money is an expression of time, right? So if we are thinking about someone, they are in our space. So the practice of cultivating joy gives us some energy for ourselves. We want to laugh. We want to live. We want to enjoy our experience, no matter what our responsibilities are, no matter what's happened to us, no matter what we have to do in physical space. We can still have joy. We can cultivate joy, and it does need to be cultivated. It is like a garden. In life, in 3D physical life, if you want to plant a garden, it's most likely not just going to happen. You have to go out and get the things you want to put there, plant them, nourish them, nurture them. And this astral safe space, this astral boundary is very much like that. We want to cultivate it. We want to cultivate ourselves. It's very important. Cultivating energy. We want to invest time in ourselves. Even if we have a million responsibilities, even if we have a million things we have to do, we can still spend a minute a day in that safe space. You don't have to go into a deep trance to do that. You can immediately imagine it. You can immediately bring it in. And if you can relax your body while you're doing it, you'll be able to cultivate some of that energy for yourself. It's very powerful, and it's really about just spending time with yourself. And I love this lady because she's kind of contented and happy, and she's just present with ourselves. It allows us to be present with ourselves, which is not something a lot of us take time to do. We tend to be very empathic and loving, and we are always worried about the world and all these other things and all these other conditions and all these things we can't control a lot of times. But no matter what your external conditions, you can always activate this safe space. You can always bring this in, no matter where you are. Even if you're just sitting alone in the woods, you can still do this. So that's why it's so powerful to spend time cultivating these astral boundaries. So that is our discussion on the trance states and astral boundaries. So now I'd like to take about 10 minutes, and if you like, I'd be happy to take you through a guided session, and it's a very relaxing experience. So I suggest having good back and neck support. You don't need to be able to see me. You can have your eyes closed or open if you want to, but most people find they tend to kind of droop a little bit, but it's whatever is most comfortable for you. So let's take a nice deep breath and release. Making sure you're nice and comfortable. I'm going to do 5 counts on the inhale, 5 counts on the exhale, just like before. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Just continue to Breathe, just allowing yourself to relax completely. Thoughts and feelings begin to wander, but just observe thoughts and feeling rising with the breath, moving through your mind, gently, slowly fading away. Don't attach to any thought or feeling. Don't push any thought or feeling away. Just allow the thought and feeling to flow naturally, gently, comfortably through your mind as you breathe and relax. Well, now just breathe a bit deeper on the count of 7 on the inhale and the count of 7 on the exhale. In 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Out. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. In 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. And out. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. And in 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. And out. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Continue to breathe as you imagine a safe, warm, happy place. A place, your dream, or a place you've been before, a place you'd like to go. An abstract, fluid place. Doesn't matter what it looks like. Just be there. Just experience it as you breathe and relax. Bring in all of the things that bring you joy. Thoughts, memory, song, poem, picture, people, pets, anything and everything that makes you happy. In this place, there are no obligations, no expectations, no pressure, nothing to do, nowhere to go. Place where you can just connect with yourself, with your higher self, with any spiritual beings who come there for you. This is a place where only peace belongs, where only joy belongs. This is your heart center. If anything arises that makes you feel sad, bad, anxious, afraid, uncomfortable. Send those things away. Let them know you'll talk to them later. You might find resistance from some of those things you think about a lot, things that seem to come into your mind on their own. They want your time. They want your energy. Maybe it's someone you care about. Even if it is, it's your choice. If you want them there, it's your choice what energies you allow in and which ones you ask to leave. But those things that are most persistent do need some time from you, do need some energy, or they wouldn't be so persistent. It's your choice now, your power to decide how much time to give those things each day or week or month. How much of your energy are you going to devote to those things? Tell them now. Tell them how much time they get to have. And now choose how much time each day you're going to spend cultivating your own energy in a place like this. A minute a day, an hour a day, as much or as little time as you need, as long as you spend some time here. It's okay to have time for yourself, no matter what your obligations are. It's okay to pour energy into yourself. That time will allow you to be a more effective person, a happier person, allow you to be a better human. Spend another moment there in that space, enjoying the feeling of pure relaxation that comes with it. And when you're ready, gently and slowly begin bringing your awareness back to your physical space, to the physical room, taking some breaths and stretching and moving your fingers and toes. How do you feel?
Wow. A little emotional and relaxed at the same time.
It's very normal.
Yes.
Emotional release and expression is a really important part of this practice.
Mm.
We really want to get in touch with our emotional energy, and especially as we go in and we realize how much of our energy and time and life that we've given away
Mm-hmm.
because we just never set aside time for ourselves. I can remember
Mm.
when Astara and I first developed this practice of the heart center. It was just so
Yeah.
transformative. And we at first didn't really realize that we were connecting to our heart centers. We're just like, all right, well, let's just
Mm.
build an astral safe space. But over time, we've come to realize that this is our heart centered
Mm.
awareness that
Right.
we're cultivating. And the more that we can purely do that, the more that we can really rest into it, the more we
Mm.
will just cultivate our energy and learn to thrive. And that really is the place where we can build a foundation, a place to go back to while we explore the outer dimensions if we want to. If we want to really
Mm.
be able to tap into our deep Akashic awareness, to connect with our past lives, with our
Mhm.
ancestors, with our star family, with our spirit guides, if we have that place of strength, that boundary to
Mhm.
do that from, it's basically the same thing as having a house. You know, you can go out and explore the
Right.
world and do all these things, but it's nice to have a place to come back to that's just yours, even if it's just, a bed someplace.
Mm.
So that's the same function. It's the same purpose. It's your astral
Mm.
home, your personal home. A lot
Mm.
of people actually like to see a home when they go
Mm.
into it. So thank you for taking the
Yeah.
time to experience this and to explore. Do you have any questions? Would you like to share anything about your experience at all?
It was just interesting that I mentally was just traveling from one place to another. It's like I had a couple of happy places, some from the past, and then I suddenly remembered there was actually a happy place right now that I have, and totally forgot about that. Like maybe I traveled one place and it was just beautiful.
Yeah. One of the things with people when they do this exercise is attachment to a certain space. And I think you kind of
Mm.
intuitively understand that it's not so much about the space as it
Mm.
is the feeling that you get.
Mm. Yes.
So if you can cultivate those emotions in any space, you can really kind of bring that space with you.
Mm.
So,
Okay.
the mind is so powerful. You could actually be in many different places at once. You can imagine many different places at once. What we want to do is we
Mm.
want to engage the mind enough, the creative abilities of the mind enough
Mm.
that we are focusing our energy. We want to focus our
Mm.
energy. There's so much just sort of lost energy from
Mm.
our emotions and thoughts that we don't direct
Right.
properly. And, I'm not going to sit here and say that I do these things perfectly all the time and that I never
Mm.
struggle, but in this modality, we really learned how to refine our energy and how to really build
Mm.
some things. And, at the end of this entire process is a state of full presence that we can drop into where we can really receive and experience that deeper awareness.
Mm.
So, thank you for being present for this webinar and for engaging. A
Okay.
lot of people just kind of sit and watch, so I appreciate you being present and
Mm.
engaging a little bit. I believe we did have a consult last
Right.
month, right? And
Yeah.
we talked a little bit
Mm.
about what you were doing going forward. So,
Yeah.
take a look at the things we have going on. I will send you an
Okay.
email that has all the information about what we went over today, the different techniques and everything like that, so you don't have to try to remember them, and there'll be some additional
Okay.
information about what we're doing now. We have our next class starting here in about a week. So if you're
Mm.
interested in doing that, that's available for you. And we have sessions and readings and all kinds of things. So reach
Mm.
out anytime to myself or to Astara and let us know if there's any questions or anything you'd
All
like
right.
to talk about. We're pretty accessible.
Thank you so much.
Of course. Thank you. Have a wonderful evening. Rest well.
You too.
Okay. Bye.
Bye.